In the world of infectious disease, the complexity of HIV might seem daunting to understand how it can spread in a population. In this video, let's cover the basics of HIV, how it's spread from person to person, and what you as a member of society can do to protect yourself and prevent further transmission. So, what is HIV? Human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, is a sexually transmitted infection, or STI, that is primarily spread from person to person through unprotected sex from an infected individual to an uninfected individual. Other forms of transmission can occur through the bloodstream via the sharing of needles among people who inject drugs, as well as transmission from an infected mother to baby during pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding. The virus works by attacking the cells that help the body fight infection. When these cells become damaged, it makes a person much more susceptible to other infections or diseases. HIV is a relatively new STI in humans. A study published in 2014 by Nuno Faria and colleagues concluded that HIV is a mutated virus from chimpanzees, with original transmission occurring in 1920 Democratic Republic of the Congo as a result of rapid population growth, sex trading, and unsterile needle use. Global recognition of this spread did not occur until 1981, after the CDC in the United States published a report of an outbreak of atypical bacterial pneumonia among gay men, in which HIV was determined to be the cause 2 years later. More recently, in 2018, there were approximately 36,000 new cases of HIV in the United States, and a total of almost 1.2 million persons living with HIV in the country. Of those cases, 46% are within the African American population, who have 8 times more HIV cases than white Americans in the United States. With approximately 38 million cases of HIV amassed across the globe, we can use an SIR model to understand how this infectious disease spreads. A basic SIR model for transmission usually consists of 3 compartments, where S represents uninfected, susceptible individuals, I reflects infected individuals, and R represents recovered or removed individuals. Following exposure, a susceptible individual moves into the infected compartment. HIV is a more unique infection for this model, however, because after becoming infected, they stay infected for the rest of their life. So, when looking at the transmission model for HIV, there is no recovered compartment, only susceptible and infected compartments. Infectiousness can also vary in each infected compartment, as viral load is often higher for a newly infected person in the first infected compartment than someone in the second infected compartment. Antiretroviral therapies, or ART, which disrupt transmission of HIV to others, can also be added to the model. Another important part of understanding the transmission of HIV is the reproductive number, or R naught. In the simplest of terms, the reproductive number is the average number of people an infected person infects in a totally susceptible population. A reproductive number above 1 means that HIV is being spread exponentially from one person to another. In the general population for most countries, the R naught for HIV is below 1. There are, however, certain subgroups of the population, like men who have sex with men, sex workers, and people who inject drugs, that have an R naught that is above 1 and usually ranges between 2 to 5. This means that when an individual is infected with HIV, they will pass the virus along to 2 to 5 other individuals depending on the situation. The disease progression of HIV to AIDS is often an extremely long process with a median of about 10 years. During this time frame, known as the incubation period, an HIV positive individual will likely not display any clinical symptoms of disease and can be completely unaware of their status. Although this individual may be asymptomatic for up to a decade, their ability to transmit the disease to others is still very much a high risk. The latency period is described as the time period for which an infected individual is not yet infectious and able to transmit disease. This period for HIV is quite short at about 6 weeks. Following this stage, however, an HIV infected individual becomes infectious. In fact, with the viral load being highest at the beginning of the infectious period, an HIV positive individual is the most infectious at the beginning of this period compared to someone who's lived with the disease for about 5 years. In the last 40 years of HIV/AIDS research, successful treatment and prevention methods have been produced. The first major treatment that was developed to treat HIV was antiretroviral therapy, or ART, which works to restore the cells that help with natural immunity within the body. This can reduce transmission from person to person by 100 times within the first month. The earlier on in disease progression that someone begins ART, the less of a transmission risk there is between sexual partners. The downside of ART is that HIV is always changing, and with that, the virus mutates and has developed drug resistance. This drug resistance has reduced the effectiveness of ART therapies and has created a need for new combinations of ARTs. For prevention, PrEP and PEP are medications that can be given to individuals who are at risk for contracting HIV because of personal behaviors or situations. Both are forms of ART that work to prevent transmission from an infected individual to a susceptible person. Pre exposure prophylaxis, also known as PrEP, is given to individuals who are currently HIV negative but are considered to be at high risk. Post exposure prophylaxis, or PEP, is given to someone who, as soon as possible, to an HIV negative person as after they have encountered a high risk exposure to help prevent an HIV infection. HIV is a serious STI that impacts millions of people across the world. When the immune system becomes damaged enough, the disease is then classified as AIDS. A severely damaged immune system increases susceptibility to infections like pneumonia, which are difficult for the person to fight off. Ways to prevent transmission of HIV are to use protection during intercourse and PrEP or PEP when engaging in high risk behavior. IV drug users are encouraged to not participate in needle sharing to prevent transmission. Testing and treatment is key for detecting HIV and reducing viral load. HIV can be a devastating virus, but it does not have to be a death sentence any longer.